Okay, so we want to be able to name things. So first thing, let's talk about zero-dimensional shapes. We're talking about just like points. These points, they just are indicating to you things that are important about the picture. These points are just going to be any old place, and they're going to be labeled with one letter. All right, so just one letter we're talking about now. So it's just, hey, there's A over here, there's B over here, there's a C over here. It's just a sort of a you are here label type thing. So what we want to talk about next is the one-dimensional stuff. Just like, the lines and stuff. One-dimensional things, we've got lines, we got line segments, we got rays. Those are the three shapes, and then we'll talk about what this means in a second. So a line is just like what I have here. Straight, going on forever in either direction, all that sort of stuff. And in order to name it, you're just going to use two letters. Doesn't matter which two you use, it can be any two. So somebody, pick two letters for me. So two people pick BD, that's nice. So we could call this one BD. And then just make sure, so we know it's a line, there's going to be a little hat on top like this. So you could also call it DB. It doesn't matter which of these four letters you use or which order, you're always still talking about the exact same thing. So if you want to talk about it as line CB, the key is just making sure you've got the little hat on top like this with the arrows on both sides so we know which thing that you are talking about. And that's all there is to it. So if you want to talk about it as a line. Now, line segment. Let's talk about line segments instead of just lines. So now let's talk about line segments. So a line segment, we're just talking about a piece of this line. So in the case of what we were doing before, BD, we're just talking about the piece of the line that goes from B to D, like this. Just this piece, like that. So we want to talk about a line segment. We're just talking about it's got a start and it's got an end. And when you label it, no arrows, just a little hat on top like that. And again, it doesn't matter which way you go. BD versus DB, they're the same thing. These are both naming the exact same line segment like this. Talk about this next one. So array. All right, so if we want to talk about array, so here's the thing. When we're going through this, think about it almost like a ray gun. You're starting in one place and you're shooting in a direction. So let's say we were talking about ray BD. That means this is our start. This is where we're standing, and this is the direction. That second letter. So when you're doing this, first things first, you always make sure that the hat has an arrow on the right-hand side like this. So just like how the line segment had a hat with no arrows and the full straight-up line had two arrows, the ray has one arrow, and it's always going to the right. We always write it like this. So like, we're talking about ray BD, we're talking about the one that starts at B and goes towards D. Y'all get what I'm saying with that? If we picked a different ray, if I picked CA, once again, notice that the arrows going to the right. C is my starting point, A is my direction. C is my starting point, and I'm going towards A. Y'all get what I'm saying with this? First letter is your starting point. Second letter is your direction, just on the line. The last thing I want to talk about is opposite rays. And opposite rays are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're two rays that go in the opposite direction. The key is that they start in the same place. So like, let's say we're talking about two rays that both start at C, right? Going this way, we're talking about ray CD, right? But now what about going this way? We're talking about, ray CA. We know they're opposite rays because they start in the same place. They both start at C, right? Their first letter is both C. And then D is going one way and A is going the other. And notice, even though like on the picture, the arrows are going different ways, here with their little hat, we always put the arrow on the right-hand side because we're not trying to indicate direction with the name. Does that make sense? We're not actually trying to say, hey, this one's going to the left, this one's going to the right. We don't care about that. This is just the symbol over the top that means I'm a ray. So last thing we want to talk about is two dimensions. We're talking about angles and we're talking about planes. Now, with angles, there's a couple different ways that you can name them, but either way you go, if you're going to use its full government name here, you go side, corner, side. It doesn't matter which way you go, side, corner, side, but you have to go side, corner, side. So one way to name this angle is angle ABC. And I want to point out that little angle symbol in the beginning, I'm typing it into the chat, that little caret, that thing is mandatory. You have to put that there so we know what you're talking about. ABC what? Oh, angle ABC. If you've got an angle that's just sort of chilling, vibing out in the middle of nowhere by itself, you can always name it with one letter like this, because see how this red angle, there's only one of them, right? Angle B, which angle B? Oh, this angle B, okay. So if it's not confusing, you can always call it by its nickname, just the vertex of it. Now with number 3, sometimes they're gonna, if there's a lot of angles going on, they don't want to clutter up the page, they're going to put numbers in there. And so I could also, since there's a little 1 here in the center like this, I can call it angle 1 like that. And it's not there, that's not like it's amount. It's not like 1 degree big. It's just, which angle is it? Oh, it's angle number 1. So here, down here, what I have is an example of a situation where you could not use naming number 2, because see, if I wanted to call this angle D, you'll be sitting there being like, Mr. Webster, which angle D? There's like 4 of them. Is it ADC? Is it ADB? Is it BDC? I don't know. Well, I can't call it angle D then, because I don't know which angle D it is. All right. Now, lastly, we've got planes. So with a plane, when you name it, you must use 3 non-collinear points. That was a big word right there. Non-collinear. Non-collinear. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, see this blue dashed line here, and I've got point A, B, and C on there. Those 3 points are collinear. They're all on the same line together. So if I'm going to name this plane, I have to use 3 points that are non-collinear, 3 points that are not on the same line. So if I use A and B, I can't use C. If I use A and B, I better be using E and D. And again, it doesn't matter the order that you use. I've got 3 examples here. You could call it AEC, call it ABD, call it ACD, whatever you like. But you got to pick 3 points that are not on the same line together in order to name this plane down here. So I had a question earlier, and I wanted to just sort of integrate it into my lesson because it was a really cool question. So the person had said, well, I know the word nonlinear. How is that different than non-collinear? So when we're talking about nonlinear, we're talking about a shape that isn't a straight line. Like, for example, here's this exponential curve, right? This is like y equals 2 to the x. This is not linear. This is non-linear. Because linear is like a straight line, y equals mx plus b, right? Non-collinear, we're talking about things that you cannot connect with a straight line together. Like these 3 dots right here, no matter how hard I try, one line, one straight line will not connect all 3 of these. Parallel and skew. So you've talked about parallel before back in Algebra 1, maybe even Algebra 2 as well. 2 lines that are parallel just don't touch, right? And what I have here is I've circled this symbol. It's like a little play button. This symbol means parallel. So if you see this in a picture, if you see 2 lines that have a play button on them, they have to match. Like these 2 both each have 1. These 2 both each have 2. If you see 2 lines that have a play button like this, or a pair of play buttons, like a fast forward button on them, they are parallel to each other. That is what you're being told. Skew lines are kind of like parallel lines, except they're not even in the same, like one of them's on a plane over here. One of them's on a plane. You can't see me because I'm presenting. But the way I have it drawn here, I don't know if that's good. But if you look at me, like imagine you've got one line going this way, and then another line is going in a completely separate direction. They're not parallel to each other. They're not making like a train tracks, but they're never going to touch. Number 4. Let's look at number 4 together just so that we can all be clear. Okay, so here's the thing. They want all the segments in the figure below. Really, what they want you to do is figure out of these, which of them are properly named segments, right?
Yeah, and that's just a line. There's no arrow. That's not
Correct.
a ray. Okay.
Correct. If you see an arrow on any of these, you know that it's not a segment, and so you should not click it. Make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
The way it works is if it's got 1 arrow, you know it's a ray. If it's got 2 arrows, you know it's a line. If it's got no arrows, then you know it's a segment. So if they want you to name the segments, you want to only pick the segments. And remember, all pieces of a line require 2 letters. So if you don't have 2 letters for the name of your segment or the name of your line or the name of your ray, you know that it's not right, yeah? Does a segment have the arrow above it? No. So when you're doing this, so lines, when you name them, should be like this. 2 letters, hat with 2 arrows on top. Rays, 2 letters, 1 arrow going to the right. Segments, two letters, no arrows at all. This is problem number 4. So the key here is picking the ones that actually match, because these are your only options, right? A through N. The only ones that you actually need to make sure you click on are the ones that are segments. And remember what I said. Lines have 2 arrows. Those aren't segments. Rays have 1 arrow. Those are also not segments. The only ones that you should be even thinking about clicking on are the ones that are line segments, the ones that have no arrows. And then just double check to make sure that you only use the letters in here. QRST, right? Is TU even in this picture? Look for all the ones that have Q, R, S, and T in there, and have a little hat with no arrows. All right, I saw a request to talk about number 8 and number 6. Let's start with number 8. So we want to name two planes that intersect in VR in the figure to the right. So intersect means that they touch, right? Intersect, that means that they cross. So mine is going to be a little bit different than yours. So if you have different letters and different things that they want you to find, it's still the same process, right? So just be aware that ours aren't going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to do mine. So I want to know the two planes, that the side of the figure, right? Which two planes cross VR. So what I like to do for a problem like this is find VR, you know? What's VR? Well, VR is this one, right? Now, which two planes are the ones that touch VR? I mean, isn't it this one and this one, right? Those two? We got to name them. Well, you're going to use 3 letters to name them. You've got V, U, Q, and R. You're going to pick 3 of those. Here you got W, V, R, and S. You're going to pick 3 of those. And then from there, it's just picking the right one, you know? So the whole point is, if you look at VR, that's the line segment right there. Now you need to figure out which two planes are touching. It's this one up front and this one on the right. So going through, it's just a matter of figuring out the name of this guy and this guy. And it's just, you've got 4 letters on this plane, pick 3 of them. You've got 4 letters on this plane, pick 3 of them, right? All right, let's look at question 6. And again, mine is going to be a little bit different. But it's just a matter of doing the exact same thing that I do, right? This is the other one, problem number 6, I was asked about. And it's the same idea. We're going the other way now. So before it was, hey, here's this line. Which two planes cross that line? Now we're going to say, all right, well, here's this plane and this plane. What's their intersection? So DCG, where's DCG? DCG. That's this one. This one on the side, right? Well, now DCG, and then we want EFG. Which one is that? That's the one down here, isn't it? This is the bottom one. And where do they touch? What is their place where they touch? It's along this line, right? It's along this fold of the box. So having to answer this, I would say either line segment or line GH, like that. Now you're going to have a different one. You're going to have different intersection, different things. So I am a very visual person, and I find that it helps me a lot to actually physically draw, like what I'm doing right here. This right here, doing this and actually physically drawing that and shading and doing all that stuff really does make a difference. Learning how to do that has made my life simpler.